Hi, William. Good to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And Suresh Ramakrishnan,
Very nice to be here, Affan. Yes, my pleasure.
thank you for coming on a Sunday evening. We dragged you out.
Not at all. It's a long weekend, so it's always nice to just get away and meet good friends and people that I admire. So, pleasure.
I'm going to start off with a little story. I don't know how much you remember this, but I wanted to save it for this podcast itself. We actually met first on a flight coming from Chennai to London,
Okay.
going back about, I'm now talking 14, 15 years. But I used to work in London. And on the weekend edition, there was you know the Hindu newspaper?
Yeah.
They had an article on Whitcomb and Shaftesbury
Okay.
and spoke about two twins,
Yeah.
yourself and your brother. And the next thing I know, on the flight, the next day, I meet this gentleman.
No way.
He's just standing right in front of me as we're boarding the flight. I have the newspaper with me and I say, hey, that's you on the newspaper. Do you remember this at all? Because I'm sure you had a lot of people.
Yeah, I do. I tell my kids that I'm a bona fide Z-list celebrity because the most random people will come up to me and say, I know you, I've seen you somewhere, or, something like that. So I say, see, you're a proper Z-list celebrity when random people come up to you and...
But I'll tell you what, which part of that story I like and remember you for is the fact that you invited me over to the Row, and I'd never been to Savile Row. I'd read about it for the first time now, going back 15 years. And you said, why don't you come out and see how a suit is cut?
Yeah.
And later that week, you had me over at the studio. I remember seeing something by Michael Jackson. You guys did something?
Yes.
Is that right?
We did. Not a Michael Jackson. It was an example. It's a copy of something that Michael Jackson had commissioned.
Right.
So
okay.
with an ambassador's coatee that Michael Jackson had copied, and we had made an exact copy of that actually for another celebrity.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So my memory is
Yeah.
not exact, but
But
somewhere
it's very
there,
similar.
somewhere
Yeah,
there,
there was
right?
a Michael Jackson, strong Michael Jackson, this thing. Yeah.
So that's the part of the story I like because
Yeah.
it's not everybody that's as friendly
Yeah.
calling you into the studio,
Yeah.
getting to see the experience of how you cut a suit.
Yeah.
Which leads me now to something I wanted to ask you a bit later, but
Yeah.
challenges of how a suit is cut.
Yeah.
You guys came onto the Row fairly recently, as it were, because we've got people on the Row who've been there for 100 years or over.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I'm
yeah.
sure that you faced a lot of challenges coming
Yes,
here.
yeah.
Can you speak to us a little bit? Because I
Yeah,
think William,
well, we've been
this will be
around.
inspiring for us because we're starting off just now, aren't we?
That's right.
You've started Arterton now a few months. Bridlen is all of 5 years internationally, though we've been in Japan for about 12, 13 years. I think we'd like to hear your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been around now for 20 years.
Wow.
So yeah, every time I say 20 years, that seems a long time, and another 5 years we'll be around for a quarter of a century. So
That's right.
we I still think of ourselves as a very new start-up almost, or up and coming thing, but we've been around for a little bit, and yeah, it takes when we came, we had no background in the industry. We had no. I used to be an investment banker. My brother, who's the co-founder of the business with me, was a consultant. I guess my interest and my background into tailoring goes just a little further than that, because when I finished university, I started working as an investment banker. And so I had to wear suits to work, and I was working in New York, and I'd get suits from the shops in New York. I tried all of the smaller brands, and I tried all the big brands. I tried Xenias, I tried the Ketons, I tried the Ateliers, and as you something there was a day when we went to a very famous shop in New York. It's called Bergdorf Goodman, where we would tend to buy. People used to go there and buy. It's the top shop in New York.
Right.
And my brother and I we just got our bonuses, feeling quite flush. Like, well, let's go buy some suits. So we go in there and we see a suit which says Giorgio Armani.
Right.
So I'm like, well, this is it. I knew absolutely nothing about tailoring. This is the mid to late 90s. Armani was more or less at his peak, the brand to have. So I said, well, it's wonderful. And I saw the ticket which said $750. Well, this was fantastic. But right next to that was another Giorgio Armani suit which said $2,800.
Right.
So it didn't quite click. It wasn't like one was Emporio Armani and one was, Armani Collezioni. They were both Giorgio
the
Armani.
same label, yeah.
Yeah. So I asked the sales assistant, I said, why is one different from the other? And it wasn't like one was on sale or anything. He said, oh, sir, this one is a fuse suit and this one is a canvas suit. So, fuse, canvas, what is this thing? So I had no idea. And at that time, this was very early days of the internet. I think Netscape, as I'm sure most people not even remember.
We don't know that stuff. Do you know Netscape?
Just came out. So this is had just come out. So there was no source of information on the net. The only source of information was a book which had just come out by this gentleman who is now very famous called Alan Flusser, called Style and the Man. That was the only source of information. So we got that. And we started devouring it to see if there was any information about it. And then slowly looking around, trying to get information about suits. And the more you find out about suits, the more you realize there's a lot more to it than just a suit.
Yeah.
A suit is just a suit. Yes, it's a piece of cloth that's cut with a jacket and a pair of trousers to drape over you. But there is so much more to it. There is the skeleton, there is the canvassing, there is the lining, there are all of these little elements, and they all have to be put together just right for it to work. So it was one of those funny things. I was a computer science computer science major at university, and as is my brother. And I guess it's a natural curiosity. I think I think maybe a lot of men tend to be like this, slightly curious. Slightly geeky perhaps, but it's a bit of a rabbit's warren. As you start unpeeling one layer of the onion, the next one comes up, and it just becomes more and more and more interesting. And suddenly the suit became so much more than just a suit. It became this sort of hobby, this sort of enthusiasm. And so we started going around to all these shops. And eventually, I guess, our journey, particularly because I was in London most of the time, took me to Savile Row.
Right.
And I started getting my suits made on Savile Row. And I found that every time I went back to New York and I wore one of my Savile Row suits, my friends and colleagues would all say, "Oh, you look fantastic! You look great! And where did you get your suit?" And I never quite got that from
your
other suits, even though they were just as expensive or maybe more expensive, and I thought they were better. I mean, I knew absolutely nothing about suits other than sort of fabric and color. And they all said, "Well, you should introduce me to your tailor someday."
To your tailor,
I said, "Yeah, absolutely, I will." And one day when I was here, I sort of casually remarked that to my cutter that, "Hey, I have a lot of friends in New York. I mean, I'd love for you to come over." He said, "Okay." And then one day he called me and said, "Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to come to New York." So it was a little bit of a holy, oh, what have I got myself into now? Because now I've made this promise. His guy's going to come, and now you're introducing friends, colleagues, clients to him. So I started chaperoning a lot of these meetings. These are people who've got a lot of money. Mm-hmm. What they don't have is a lot of time.
Right.
And what they certainly don't have is a lot of knowledge or any knowledge. It's different today when you've got, preponderance of blogs and vlogs and the internet and all of these things. But in those days, there was literally nothing that people had.
Yeah.
So we found that my brother and I were constantly chaperoning all of these meetings, helping people say, "Oh, look, don't go for this suit with the pink and, purple overcheck, regardless of how nice it is, because you can't wear that in a meeting." Equally, they would ask the cutter, "I want to wear this jacket and go with a pair of jeans." And he'd be like, "Sir, you can't wear jeans with a jacket."
Right.
So there was a gap on the professional side where cutters were great at cutting and measuring people up, but they were not really good in
styling
offering,
them of sorts.
Yeah, because they didn't share the same socio-economic background as the customer. And equally, the customer did not feel comfortable wearing what they were recommending. So there was this sort of gap in the market for good quality advice.
That's it.
Which sort of, convinced my brother and I, over time, we found ourselves spending more time buying clothes and thinking about clothes and introducing people. So we said, well, we should probably just start off on our own. And that's sort of how
That's interesting
Whitcomb
because
Shaftesbury started off.
I see that gap, even though you saw this almost 20 odd years ago, I see what Arterton is doing here and William as bringing that gap, sort of closing that gap as it were, 20 years later in a perhaps different way. I see Arterton as you guys do everything but suit making. Isn't that how you
sometimes we describe that way.
describe
But
yourself,
the funny thing is, in Suresh and others, sometimes I come to you for advice. I think you're 10, 15 years ahead of us, and we're still sort of learning a little bit about how to do business and how to cater to the community. We've got some real enthusiasts on the one hand, right? These are guys who wear suit and tie on the weekend anyways, right? And maybe they go out grocery shopping, picking
To the
up.
pub.
You get-
We get that 100% all the time, yeah.
Right. And on the other hand, we have sort of individuals who are very discerning. Most of them have, economic means, let's say, and this crowd tends to be a bit older, and they look for slightly different things. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but are there these two groups of people, and do they look for slightly different things?
Oh yeah, they look for very different things, and I always say we've got sort of two large groups of customers very similar to yours. One is the people who just wear suits because they need to. It is a requirement for them professionally. They've just grown
Peacocks,
up.
yeah.
No, not the peacocks. The ones who've just grown up with suits. And that's just their bread and butter. And then you've got the other ones who are the enthusiasts. Who could be the peacocks and all of those people who do nothing but think about suits. I just came from a meeting with a client who's come all the way from New York just to have some fittings, and he bought a suit and he said, I can't wear anything except that one suit. So he ordered 2 more suits, and he wanted a fitting. And the whole thing for him is just to go through all these fittings. It's in many ways more important than the actual suit, the process of meeting with the
means
tailor,
is more important than the
going
ends, I
through the
suppose.
fitting,
Yeah.
going through all of this, and he enjoys it. And he laid out then his wardrobe that he's planned over the next 3 years. Tweed suits, odd sport coats, odd jackets, and he then, after talking to me about it, with all the cloth numbers and everything, he said, I'm going to send you a detailed email. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But this is the new round of customers who, he was the one who was asking me about your hangers. He knew more about your hangers than I'm sure you do. And he started talking about how wonderful they are and how amazing they are, and would they ship to New York, and so this is that new breed of customer who enjoys not just clothing, but all of the associated accoutrements that come with it. Shoes, hangers, bags. We have another client of ours who's emailed me yesterday saying he's ordering some bags from you, and he wonders if he might be able to ask you to Arterton to send the bags to our shop to hold.
Right.
So I said absolutely no problem at all. So we have a lot of people who are very enthusiastic about
the whole menswear space,
all of
as
it,
were.
yeah, because
And this
it's a larger thing, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is, and that's where I see William filling the gaps besides tailoring,
Yeah.
perhaps, and coming in, the hangers as we
Yeah.
spoke about, and the shoes,
Yeah.
which you don't obviously
No,
do. and
absolutely.
William brings that, closes that gap with shoes and other accessories.
We were talking earlier about what are the things you learned, and one of the things for me is that we try and be incredibly focused as a company. If you look at the best companies, they do one thing or 2 things, and they're very good at that, and that's all they do. And so for us, for example, people have always said for years, why don't you offer shoes? I'd love to buy shoes from you. Or why don't you sell socks? Why don't you sell accessories? And I said no. We're going to make suits, we're going to make jackets, we're going to make trousers, we'll make shirts. That's all we'll do. We are happy to recommend any number of places if you want, but we're very, very focused. And I think that's one of the important things for businesses.
I
You
agree.
guys just focus on shoes,
Absolutely.
and that brings you a lot of credibility. The minute
it.
you start making shorts tomorrow, are you a shoemaker or a shorts maker?
That's it.
Right.
Even our name, if you know,
Yeah.
Bridlen, comes from the inspiration which Mr. Watanabe, my mentor, gave. Is what you call the bridle or bridle, what's on a horse.
Bridle,
yeah.
Bridle,
Yeah.
And it's got this sort of focus to just look forward, win the race.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do classic men's
Yeah.
men's shoes
Yeah.
in Goodyear welted
Yeah.
construction, and we're not going to look towards other things like, let's say, sneakers
Yeah.
or other forms of construction. It's just going to be the one thing
Yeah.
and one thing only. And that will take us a lifetime to make.
Yeah.
And let's do that. Let's
But that's
do
a
one thing.
beautiful and the right way to do business. Good things take time, but if you look at the best brands, there is a consistency in the messaging, and that comes through at all points, all the touch points. It's the product, it's the messaging, and everything they do. And I remember the first time we were talking about your shoes, and this is what you communicated to me. Your shoes are classic, and they're Goodyear welted construction. And it's amazing, many years after that, you still say the same thing, which is fantastic, because if you drive that comes through in your product range.
While we have this kind of direction with side rails on, I still think there's a lot of space for creativity within the space itself, and things to do other sort of bring other elements into the making, be it shoes, be it jackets. Earlier today, you were speaking about a customization that your client wanted, and I want to show you this, William. It's actually on the jacket that he's wearing today.
Right.
It's well.
We were talking about I always exactly. You can be fairly classic or you can be fairly modern. You can do anything, but you don't have to just do one thing. So, one of the things I did with my jacket is I was talking about a jacket we made for a client. I had told him that he should make a lining out of one of his mother's saris in his suit and his jacket. So I'd been pushing him for a long time. Finally, got me one of his mother's saris, and we made a beautiful lining in his suit out of that. The other day, he invited me to his birthday party, and it was a beautiful black tie affair. And then he pulled out his dinner jacket and he showed me the lining. It was his mother's sari, which is wonderful. And I told him when I did it, look, it's wonderful, it's personal. Every time you look at your lining, you'll remember your mother.
That's very nice.
And sadly, his mother passed away about a month ago.
Oh, damn.
But he was so happy that he did it, because while she was alive, he got it from her, and he put it, and he said, look, I remember her every time I see that. And, he was just, it's so personal, so you don't have to be just restricted to one thing. I mean, I'll show you another similar personal thing.
Yes.
In my jacket, it just is very classic, simple, navy single-breasted jacket.
Right.
And the lining also looks fairly straightforward, just a simple white lining, nothing fancy. But at the back, when my son was in second grade, he made this drawing that I absolutely loved. And I've always told him, I'm going to make a lining out of that. So I made this lining.
Check that out.
And I had it, I had this lining printed on...
you had it scanned and then printed
scanned and printed. And so it's very personal. No one can see it. But every time I put it on, I think of my son, and I think of all those wonderful moments when he was, in second grade, and he did it, and he was so happy, and I was so happy. So it makes it's unique, it's personal, and it's a wonderful thing. So the point is, to your point about you can be blinkered, but it doesn't mean that comes at the cost of innovation or
absolutely
creativity.
Not. And I think this is what Whitcomb Shaftesbury brings a little bit different to the row, William, is they allow you to do this sort of customizations that don't really speak out loud, but speak towards more style first.
Yeah.
And then your personalization is yours. It doesn't have to show out loud. And I suppose that's in some way what you're talking about as well at Arterton. You're not talking about loud styling, loud fashion, is it? It's more about bringing the community together of classic menswear enthusiasts. It's not so much about the peacocks. It's not so much, I think, about even the formal wear, the elderly gentleman, as you put it. It's across the spectrum. It's building that community, isn't it?
Right. I mean, there are different ways to look at it. I've personally not really given any thought to whether something is particularly loud or not. I think we do a lot of B2B, and if someone wants their house logo on it, who am I to say whether it's loud or if it's quiet? In the case of the hangers, one thing that I can think of is the Wajima hangers. Now, Wajima is sort of an art form that stems from Japan, and it involves gathering seashells of a particular hue and then painting it on a hand-carved hanger. We've had all sorts of requests. We've had actually one gentleman, he had a purple Rolls Royce, and he wanted the same hue on the hanger. Now, we pitched it to the artist. Mind you, I mean, these hangers. They're hand painted, right? So there's an artist in Japan that does it, and he said, William, that purple, I can't find a seashell for that, so can we try a different color? So there is sort of a whole creative process to it, and just like bespoke menswear, there can be a bespoke process to some of these hangers. In the
That's
case,
amazing. That's a really interesting way to
I
see
mean,
it.
that's
Yeah.
the thing. I don't know where these, I mean, there's lots of creativity around, and I have a feeling that the enthusiast community is growing because people are seeing Kirby's YouTube, they're seeing Gentleman's Gazette, they're reading all these things, and that's really bringing people who are sort of on the fence about shoes, about suits, into the fold. There are guys who are object orientated, there may be engineers, there may be professionals in their own right, and they have a little bit of an interest in these things, but then watching things on YouTube really gets them. So it's that community that's being built up that wasn't available 20 years ago.
I would add to that. I would say there's the sort of the add-on to that is there is, if you look at the space of menswear and all the associated things, there is certainly a mushrooming of interest across, because of the availability of social media, the availability of all of these things like your podcast, like blogs and all of these things, where there is more information. So menswear is certainly, on the rise. And with that, people are looking for new things, new channels. But I think the biggest thing about men is that most men outside the peacocks are afraid of buying something, wearing something, purchasing something, and then being ridiculed for it. No. So by and large, we are creatures of, we don't want to draw a lot of attention to it, but we actually do want to look good. We all want to look like Sean Connery, but we just don't want to act like, we don't want to appear to be that we are trying to look like Sean Connery, So, and that's why the availability of information, whether it's in print or social media, now allows people to consume this information and then go out and make purchases, which they know will actually be good, safe purchases.
Absolutely.
Because they've been vetted by people who've got a lot of experience.
Yeah, but do you guys think the medium has changed over the years? Because I'm imagining, people back then, they consume information too. They might consume it differently, but they read it in a magazine, right? Maybe GQ or maybe some of the other ones, right? Do you think that the community is growing because there's a change in the medium, or is it something else?
I suppose it's a lot more accessible now with the digital forms of consuming this.
100%.
Instagram.
100%, yeah.
For those who want to go deeper, you've got YouTube with longer videos. This podcast as well is a more long form video. But then for a different audience, we've got the shorts, we've got little bits of the same information perhaps presented to them. The younger audience does tend to have a smaller attention span. But having said that, they like that first clip to come on, and if that catches their fancy, they're going to go on to the longer format of that little bit. So get these little snippets from everywhere, and whatever catches their fancy, then go a little bit deeper. And to that point, Kirby's video, as you mentioned, is more of the longer format.
Yeah, that's right.
Your brother loves something like that. Yeah. I do it once in a while, perhaps for shoemaking, where I take a lot of interest from. So the Japanese channels that I follow, they go really deep into every small aspect. I'm watching one right now about just the side of the sole, how they create the ridges on it. And it's a challenge I've had for so long. And I don't know how one would go about doing something like that. For all the other shoemakers I've asked, I've not got clear or, step-by-step advice. But now I turn to YouTube. Well, first it was actually Instagram, and then from there on to YouTube. I've got now 45 minutes of video showing me exactly how I need to do something like that. That's a technical aspect. To your point about suit making, there's so much that you can talk to us as well. We won't have all the time in the world to speak about the aspects of the technicalities of suit making, but I'd love to know from you as well, what is it different perhaps that you bring to the row? Because you're 20 years on the row, a little bit more perhaps, but you still bring some sort of fresh elements, something a bit different.
Yeah, I'd like to think what we bring to the row is we come in as customers. When I say we, it's my brother and I. We've come in from the customer side into the row. So we understand what the customer is thinking, what they might be needing, as opposed to being just a cutter or a salesperson just trying to sell an existing product.
Right.
So we are always tweaking, we are always fine-tuning, we are always making things better. We're always finding different ways in which we can take a product. It's that Japanese principle of Kaizen. You start here, but you end up there because you're constantly adding little things. Constantly. I'll give you a simple example. The other day, I was talking to one of my cutters, and she was just running a hand over her trouser waistband and said, "Well, I feel something over here," and it was because of a particularly thin fabric, and the waistband canvas could be felt through that.
Right.
So she's like, well, perhaps what we should do is maybe find a bit of silicea, which is a certain type of fabric, to cover that, to give a slightly softer feel when you have that. No one would notice it. No one would care. It's a lot more work to be done, but we are going to
do that anyway.
Yeah. We're going to add that. So a little tweak that we put in, into the garment. So constantly adding little details before people realize you end up with a completely different garment. So there is certainly that sort of owner's attention to detail. Yes. There is that sort of constant thinking, I'm wearing the product. If you walk around Savile Row, if you walk around, most of the tailors do not wear what they make. Certainly the workmen don't. And half the guys who are selling you the product will show up in jeans and t-shirts, change into their suit in the shop, and then work. And at the end of the day, they'll change and they go. We don't. We are always wearing the product. We are always thinking about it. So when I'm walking and moving, like, oh, maybe I'm feeling something up here. I need to change that. Yeah. So we're constantly making those little tweaks, imperceptible to anyone but us, but ultimately leads to a better product.
And this is actually very interesting, because we were speaking with Kirby actually yesterday about continuous improvement in our products. And as a young company, ourselves included, we always have that space for improvement. But you need to keep your ears to the ground, one to the customer, hear what they have, wear it ourselves. Yeah. And I think I speak for all of us here when we say the products that we wear are our own, but also what you endorse or what you sell here at Arterton, William, are things that you would use yourself.
Yes, certainly.
So because these are all owner-driven companies, isn't it? You run you run Arterton.
Yeah.
You would only sell things to your customer what you believe in. You would perhaps recommend someone towards Whitcomb Shaftesbury because you've worn their things, and say, you know what, you're not going to do suits. These are the guys who are going to make a great suit for you. Go that way. But the same with your other products as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a wonderful anecdote about this, and I've told it a few times, and I have a feeling that some people don't believe me, but this relates to the conception of the company itself. So back in the day, I was very much a patron of Bespoke in the UK and Hong Kong, and a number of suits, and I didn't have the garment bags for them. So I'm thinking, okay, what do I want in a good garment bag? I started talking to some friends, we got some patterns drafted, and I went to a manufacturer, and I'm like, hey, okay, this garment bag doesn't exist, but I'd just like maybe 60 of them for my suits, right? They came to me and said, William, we can't do 60, but we can do 1,000. And I'm just like, wow, that's way too much, I don't need that. So I kind of did up the numbers, and I'm like, okay, actually, it's not too bad. I can maybe do 1,000. I've got a bit of warehousing space in Hong Kong anyways that I can just make use of. So I got the 1,000 bags. I ended up using 60, 70 of the bags. And then I started giving away these bags to my friends and family and people in the trade. And I was like, wait a minute, why don't I just sell the darn thing? And I kid you not, that's how it started.
Is that right? That's a good story.
It is completely true. I mean, over the years, we've made some small amendments and improved the design, but that's exactly
the case in point of improving as you move, yeah.
But here's the thing. The reason why I made those bags is because it didn't exist in the market. And I think that was part of why we're sort of chugging along now, which is, look, some of these products that we do, they're very specialist, right? No one's really done them in the past. It's that classic, business saying, you got to get into the niche and do something that someone else didn't do, and I think that's kind of worked out nicely for us just by happenstance.
It is incredible because there's very few companies which unless they're owner driven and the owner's consuming the product, it's so easy to lose touch with what people really want and people really do. It's usually some guy in marketing dreaming up of something which they can then try and find a way to peddle off to an audience, but there's no genuine thought behind it because they don't actually consume the product. and I think that makes a huge difference.
So while it's
Yeah.
important to take the feedback, we're going to take it from people who know about it. So nobody can come to you and tell you how to make a suit.
Yeah.
You will listen to them about how they'd want it, but you are the technical guy. You're
Yeah.
going to take their information, take the bits that make sense, take the bits that you'd like to improve perhaps
Yeah.
on your suit, and do it a little bit differently.
Well, I'll tell you another good example of someone who doesn't consume it, maybe all aspects of the product. This is an interesting story. I happened to be the first customer to get a Tom Ford bespoke
Wow.
suit.
Is that right?
My Tom Ford bespoke suit says bespoke 001. Now, I learnt about Tom Ford when he left Gucci, was not allowed to do anything, so he started his brand, Tom Ford, and it was just menswear.
Right.
And his whole thing was, look, he went around Savile Row and he tried out stuff from all the tailors, and then he felt, well, the customer experience was very dry, it was very formal, which I do agree with. So he said he wanted to bring in a bit of Hollywood glamour to the experience, and so he started his own thing, and so he was going to create bespoke but with an exceptional customer experience.
Wow.
And we were very young in our cycle at that time. I forget when it was, but if you Google when Tom Ford as a brand started, of course Tom Ford is there and we are here, but
Mid-90s,
that's
yeah.
not the point. I said, well, it's Tom Ford. He's clearly onto something. I need to experience
What they
this
have to offer,
this transformational client experience, because
Yeah.
we were all about creating this incredible customer experience for our customers, something where they are not intimidated by Savile Row, something where they feel comfortable, where they're happy, all of these things. Well, let's see. So we go to his shop in New York, which was the only shop at that time, the flagship shop, and the whole premise was modeled after his living room in London, and it was beautiful. It was all nice. We go there, and I meet the salesperson. I said, I'd like to make an appointment. And he said, absolutely, sir. I said, look, I'll have my assistant contact you and make. He said, great. So I had my assistant email him at some point to set up an appointment when I was back in New York, which was, I think, a couple of months after the original thing. And I wanted to see how good they were. So I said 9:30 on a Saturday morning. So 9:30 I show up on a Saturday morning, having confirmed a few days before that.
Right.
Shop is closed.
Oh.
Then I see someone frantically running and opening it up. And, well, it's not
Was
the
it
best.
Tom Ford, was it?
It wasn't Tom Ford, no, it was the sales guy. Anyway, then they open it up, and then I guess then they usher me into this beautiful thing with this spectacular staircase, which is where the bespoke customers are supposed to go, not the riff-raff sitting on the ground floor where they're buying ready to wear. And it was a beautiful staircase. I'm like, well, this is great. So would you like to take the lift? I'm like, well, I don't need a lift to go up, a flight of stairs. So we took the sweeping staircase, and we go through these beautifully paneled rooms, which really look like they're out of a Hollywood mansion, gold and dark wood, and Macassar is lovely. All of it's great. We go to a room, just getting better by the second. The only problem is it feels a bit like a nightclub.
Right.
Not
Too dark,
where
you
it's
mean?
too dark. There is absolutely no light.
That
So
must
we
make
go
it a
to-
challenge to see the fabrics.
Well,
and
you
whatnot.
have no idea. Maybe actually in reality you'll find out it actually wasn't, because we go there and they said, so what can we offer you? A martini? Can we offer you a gimlet? Can we offer you a Negroni? I said, well, how about an espresso?
No.
Well, that threw them for a whack, because the whole idea is you go in and you're sipping a martini. What could be more Hollywood than that, while your tailor is measuring you up and. Well, at 9:30 on a Saturday morning,
yes.
I wasn't in a mood for a martini. Now that threw them for a toss. So I could see him from the window running up and down Madison Avenue trying to get.
Get an espresso for you.
And they finally came with some ice cold one from this thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we sit in this dimly lit room and we start looking at swatches. And they very proudly told me that there are 3,500 different swatches, and I
Wow.
believe it,
Okay,
because Tom
nice.
Ford was partly owned by Xenia, and they're Acas, all that, and they're beautiful. So I open the first one, it's grey, the second one is grey, and the third one is a grey herringbone, the fourth one is a grey Prince of Wales, the fifth one is a grey bird's eye, the seventh one is a grey barleycorn, the eighth one is a grey shark skin, ninth one is a charcoal shark skin, charcoal barleycorn. I'm like, well, this is wonderful. Having gone through about 3,200 of the 3,500, so I'd like a blue suit. And they showed me one which was a midnight blue, which was sort of a fraction bluer than your black sole. And I said, well, are there any other blues? And the answer was, Mr. Ford doesn't like blue. So I'm thinking, right. So I've come all the way here for this wonderful experience in this incredibly dimly lit room, but I haven't got any choice of color. Fine, okay, Tom Ford is, I have a lot of respect for, his styling and his thing. He's a designer, it's his right. I have no problem with grey. I picked a grey sharkskin, grey. And while they said it was a bespoke, it wasn't really, it was a made to measure.
Oh, it wasn't?
No, it's a made to measure. And the difference between bespoke and made to measure, for anyone who doesn't understand, is bespoke, the pattern is drafted for you from scratch off a set of measurements taken. Made to measure, they put a jacket on you and then they make adjustments to that to get to your fit. So they're very different animals. So there were two cuts. There was what they call the Savile Row cut and the slim cut. So I tried the Savile Row cut. Well, this is great. This is lovely. It was a knockoff of a Chittleborough and Morgan suit with the rope shoulders, the broad peak lapels. Wonderful. Great. I like this. The only problem is it doesn't fit me at all. I mean, I'm quite a slim guy.
Right.
So I didn't fit their Savile Row Savile Row cut. So they said, well, try the slim cut. I tried it out. It was great. It looked beautiful, nice and slim. Everything was good. So I said, okay, great. So I'll go for the slim cut, but can I get all of those features? No, sir.
No.
You can't do it.
Oh dear.
I said,
quite an experience.
I like the ticket pocket in the Savile Row. Can I get that? No, sir, you can't. How about the two vents? No, you can only go for the single vent. So I said, okay, I can only choose grey. I cannot choose any of my style details. I can't see anything anyway, so it's probably all right. What can I choose? I said, well, for your trousers, you can get belt loops or side buckles. So well, that's fantastic. That's it. I've got all my choices. Let's go for the side buckles. Fine. Measures taken, whatever, put. And you pay the whole thing. This is probably about 19, 18, whatever years ago. $5,900 in those days.
Right.
Or $6,000, whatever. Pay it, go away. 8 weeks later, I get an email, your suit is ready. Fantastic. Great.
Okay.
Go in. Of course, this time, I'm not taken to the VIP room upstairs.
Not anymore.
No, I'm just now in a thing. So pop the suit on. Suit fits great, no problem. It's the fabric I picked. Great. Put the trousers on, great. The only thing I notice, it's got belt loops and no side adjusters. So I'm like, I'm in the trade. I understand sometimes, these things happen. It's not the worst thing. I said, look, I wanted side adjusters. But you've only given me belt loops. Can you please change it? And they're like, no, sir, sorry, you can't. I said, why not? We don't have fabric. I'm like, you're owned by a fabric mill. There's only one detail I can customize in the entire suit.
And you got that wrong.
You've got that wrong, and you're not going to fix it. So I was like, that left me a bit nonplussed. So this is my point, bringing back to full circle about how a process has been designed by someone who doesn't really use it or not involved in it.
I agree.
So there's just something sort of created, but then, left at that.
And that brings me to another question about Savile Row. Savile Row is now going through a big change, I would say. But these changes have happened in leaps and bounds always with the row, because few generations of the original tailors, as it were. But this time around, it sees a challenge in a very different way, as I see it at least. Is that you have fewer and fewer people coming onto the row. While we have spoken about all these different crowds coming, as a total number, you have fewer people coming. Do you see that as a challenge? I mean, and you started this off quite new, because I don't think you would have done it if you didn't see a business case in it either. You're a smart man, I know, William.
Wow.
So how are you guys filling that difference, as I see it, a sort of smaller number of the overall crowd, as it were? This challenge in Savile Row, as I see it. Am I right in saying that? And what's your take on that?
I mean, you guys feel free to jump in, but I think it is a cultural shift. I think people are dressing differently, and that's the primary motivator for the changes that we're seeing. I think this is offset to some extent by the growing enthusiast community, and I think we in the trade ought to grow that community a bit more and bring people into the fold, because after all, it's an interesting hobby, it's an interesting area to be in, and that's why we're in it. Right? I mean, we're in it presumably because we like it, and number two, because we're good at it, and hopefully both of these things are true. So I do think people are dressing differently. I think a lot of this is, some sociological phenomena, right? But maybe we can have a few folks who like dressing with tailored garments and wearing a tie and being presentable in the classic menswear fashion.
And do you think there's another challenge on Savile Row going around right now with perhaps different kinds of fabrics? You see more synthetics coming around, but is that a challenge at all on Savile Row?
Not in Savile Row. Not in Savile Row. I think it's partly, as William says, the customers who are coming. I always say, people say, well, do you have any sort of walk-in trade? And I say we almost never have. I think I've had one walk-in customer who got a couple of bomber jackets made in Vicuña. The only reason I decided to do that was because it was a Vicuña order. So I'm like, well, I'll take it. Yes. But the thing is that there is no walk-in trade in Savile Row unless you do ready to wear. Because I always say, who is going to, in today's day and age, take the time to go into a shop that he knows nothing about, doesn't know the people, gets measured, comes back once, comes back twice, comes back possibly 3 times over 3 or 4 months and hopes it fits the way he wants it to fit. Right? It's just too much of a thing. So today's customer already knows where he's going to go, and he probably knows exactly what cloth he's going to buy before he goes in there. So to that extent, this sort of customer is not going to go for synthetics. He's going to go for materials that he's read about, he knows work well, because there's no shortage of information available. And part of the reason why they're spending that much money is also because they want access to this other bit of information, which is the material, which is, just like you go to a great extent talking about the quality of your leathers. People want to know that. That's one of the things that attracts them to the product. It's not just the shoe. Yes, the shoe is beautiful, the shape is beautiful, but it's also all these other elements. So yeah, people are not buying synthetics in Savile Row, even though there's a lot of synthetic blend suits and things going around. Yeah. Not at the community that
we're catering
is to. in this space. And I think I would imagine, I want, in your experience, do people do the same thing about shoes as well?
We get a lot of requests, honestly, to make it in things called vegan materials. But because it's against also our ethos of sustainability, leather being the most sustainable option, we obviously say no. If it was within this the realm of leather, we do horse leather, for example. That was actually out of demand from a certain clientele who said, they enjoy it because they've tried it in other brands, and this is something that we would do. We say absolutely, because it's still leather. Some would argue it's not leather, it's more a membrane, but you get the point. But no, if it's synthetics, we would absolutely say no, because it's a material that I don't find it to be sustainable at all. With that, I'm going to have to end this podcast. It's been lovely chatting with you, Suresh and William.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's been an absolute pleasure.
And we'll see you both soon on another podcast.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well done.